a so-called comedian who spoke before Mr. Trump and made a number of racist comments, including one about Puerto Rico.
Tony Hinchcliffe is under attack for making inappropriate jokes. But part of the function of comedy is to make inappropriate jokes. One of the greats of our time from my country is Ricky Gervais. And Ricky Gervais says that if you're making a joke about, say, a child that's been murdered, we all know that that's a terrible, terrible, sad thing. And indeed, it's the terribleness and the sadness of the subject that makes it appropriate for comedy. Woody Allen, remember that guy, used to be able to talk about his genius. Woody Allen says no subject should be forbidden or verboten because comedy has to get us in there. And in fact, I think it's, and help us explore those ideas, profanity is the gelignite that explodes for us new territory to psychically explore. Great comedians know this. Now, I think part of globalism is this dehumanizing and puritanical component where they don't want us to have a sexuality. Everything's disgusting. Sign of form. You've got a winky woo. Don't touch each other. Don't look at each other. They want us to have a degree of hostility, fear, and trepidation when it comes to subjects like race. Don't mention anything. Don't look at each other. Slavery! The Holocaust! They want us inhibited and continually afraid so that we can't fill the space between us with sanctity, sacredness, unity, and a shared goal to improve together and change the world, and more importantly, have the ability to attack power. Tyrants have always loathed comedy because it's a bullet they cannot defy or decry. Notice how politicians these days all try and be funny. We've just seen Kamala Harris try out crowd work. Everybody shout your own name.
Okay, now I want each of you to shout your own name. Do that.
Remember the moment where she tried to do a heckle put down? Oh, isn't that good that she spontaneously said, I think you're at the wrong rally?
Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally.
Assuming that someone was saying something deliberately political partisan, when in fact what they were saying was, Jesus is Lord. Compare that to someone, as Joe Rogan mentioned on YouTube. Did you know Rogan spoke to Trump? Try finding it on YouTube, baby. When he said, you were very funny when you said of Hillary Clinton, like she goes, I don't want this guy to be president, and yeah, because you'd be in jail.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
People appreciate comedy because it shows that you are spontaneous. It shows you are present in the moment. Tony Hinchcliffe made a bunch of jokes that were on the subject of race. Now, whilst I raised eyebrows when I heard the word watermelon mentioned in connection with African American or black people or, Puerto Rico being referred to as a floating garbage dump, like when you hear that stuff, it's the fact that it's offensive that is the fuel for the joke, i.e., if you didn't think that was offensive, there would be no humour there. So the very fact that you're finding it offensive is the machinery, the mechanic, the juice of the joke. To say something that had no offence in it would have no fuel to send it in the orbit of comedy. So do you want people to censor jokes for you, or do you want to decide for yourself what's sayable? Let me know in the comments on Rumble. Let me know in the comments on Locals. Yes, it's possible to make bad jokes. Yes, it's possible to make mistakes for jokes. I've received death threats as a result of things I said at the VMAs. I made jokes about George W. Bush then. I made jokes about the Jonas Brothers, actually, and their purity rings and stuff. So I know what it's like to make mistakes when it comes to jokes or to misjudge the room. But if you book a comic who's about profanity and roasting, who's built his reputation and career on sharp, barbed remarks, then that is what you can anticipate and expect. And within the rubric of comedy, being offensive is a requirement. In fact, I can tell you this, on a personal level, when I tease somebody or torment them, that is one of the ways that I show love. And let me tell you, I've got in trouble doing that, even relatively recently, because it's the way I playfully suggest to people that, hey, look, we have simpatico, we have chemistry. So when the world tries to strip you of the ability to laugh with, at, one another, it's doing something interesting. You have to ask yourself about intentions. This is where you have to trust yourself above the state, above any censor. Trust yourself as being in alignment with some universal principle, or dare I say it, God. Do you think that that person has got hatred in them, darkness, cruelty? Or do you think it's more likely that as we approach an election, the centralized systems of media and control and governance are attempting to metastasize what he said into something genuinely dark and nasty so that they can use it for political point scoring? Now, the state and the legacy media don't want you to have that power. They don't even want you being able to choose for yourself whether or not to take a vaccine that might not have been as well clinically trialed as they first claimed, or ivermectin. They are telling you that ivermectin is a horse paste. Remember that? They changed the colour of Joe Rogan's skin. And if you or I did that, we'd be called racist, particularly if we made some pigment errors. So you got to ask yourselves, do you want your right to laugh at one another taken away from you? Do you want comedy to be prescribed or prohibited by the state? Or do you trust in yourself and do you trust in God? Let's have a look at what Tony Hinchcliffe said and what he meant and what they want you to think that he meant. Let's get into it together now.
While the candidates will be in the battleground states, the talk on the campaign trail continues to surround yesterday's Trump rally in Madison Square Garden, and particularly a so-called comedian who spoke before Mr. Trump and made a number of racist comments, including one about Puerto Rico. Today, the Trump campaign and Ms. Harris responded.
It was a comedian who made a joke in poor taste. Obviously, that joke does not reflect the views of President Trump or our campaign.
And Eyewitness News reporter Joe Torres spoke with Puerto Rican lawmakers and voters. And Joe, is this the kind of comment that could actually cost Mr. Trump some votes?
You know, Sade, it makes you wonder what's the political strategy here, right? It's tough to figure it out. Here we are in the Bronx, home to many of the roughly 1 million Puerto Ricans who live in the 5 boroughs, who live here and vote here as well. Many of them we talked to today, they knew about the comments that were uttered at the rally last night. They also knew that it wasn't the former president who uttered those words, but at the same time they said it'll be the former president who pays the price on Election Day.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
That was comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, who tried to fire up a jam-packed Madison Square Garden crowd of Trump supporters ahead of the former president's speech. The joke bombed, but the explosive fallout reverberated across the country to the 5 million plus stateside Puerto Ricans, many of them registered voters, and more than 3 million American citizens on the island. The spokesperson from the Trump campaign today acknowledged those comments uttered at the rally yesterday were in poor taste and do not reflect the campaign or the feelings of the former president. Coming up in our next report at 6 o'clock, you'll hear from more Puerto Ricans who will explain to you why they don't believe that.
It's interesting, isn't it, how this information is used, utilized, and rendered. Comedy is a very particular aspect of human nature, our ability to make one another laugh, our ability to tell one another stories, our ability to enter into consensual spaces for consensual reasons. Rumble's the home of this channel, Stay Free, and a leader in defending the fundamental human right of free speech. They've joined X to sue a cartel of advertisers and ad agencies who conspire to block ad revenue from going to the platforms. Recently, they've launched Rumble Premium. This, I think, is going to be a game changer for all of us. It's an ad-free viewing experience with great perks for viewers and creators. Rumble Premium will give you the ability to dive into your favorite content on your mobile or desktop or smart TV and savor every uninterrupted second of my content. Why don't you upgrade to Rumble Premium today? Support my free speech and the free speech of other content creators on this platform. Please go to Rumble now, rumble.com/premium. And if you use the code BRAND, you'll save $10 and Rumble will be aware that our stream is creating great converts. So that's rumble.com/premium and do use the code BRAND to save $10. Anyway, there's a link there at the bottom of the screen now. We're posting it in the chat. Join up. Now, elsewhere, the at least part Mexican George Lopez, he might be fully, I don't know the lineage of George Lopez, he made some jokes about Mexicans. Let's have a look at that, because what I believe is we are living in a time where outrage is utilised in order to control people. You're invited to reimagine people's past if it's convenient. They might decide that 1 minute you're a hedonist and Lothario and that's fantastic, and then they might decide, no, I don't like this guy anymore. What he is a criminal. I know that because that has happened to me. Now, I know that the media, if they have an intention, like, for example, we want this party to win the election because we believe that they will legislate in favour of large corporations better than the other bunch, that the paymasters that ultimately control legacy media will benefit from them staying in government. They'll tell you whatever they need to tell you. If they want people to take a certain medication, they won't mention side effects or adverse events. They just will, or let alone excess deaths, they'll keep that stuff quiet. So remember, before you make a decision about whether or not it's of course, look, if you extract the concept of comedy, then of course it's not very nice to say Puerto Rico is a flotilla of garbage. But when you include comedy, that's just the sort of thing you would say in a comedic context. In fact, it was Tina Fey, the SNL writer, that says that normal people would laugh at a man dressed as an old woman falling down some stairs. Comedians would laugh at an old woman falling down some stairs. If you operate in the realm of comedy, particularly as Tony Hinchcliffe does, he does a show where people come up and do a minute-long turn, and then he offers up with a panel critiques. That's a person that lives in comedy. That's a person that's operating on a different comedic bandwidth. So if you extract comedy, it's the same as extracting consent from sexuality. Between consenting adults, I guess, do whatever you want. But if you take out consent, everything is a crime. And so we live in a time where people manage the way that information is received. What the media are doing now is leveraging that ability in extremis, because they know that what's happening is a shift in power. We're communicating directly with one another without gatekeepers. What Napster did to the record industry, independent media is doing to legacy media, and they do not like it. And there's a pact between big tech, in the majority thereof, the government, and state media to control information. There are formal bureaucratic bodies that help organise this. YouTube's part of it, BBC's part of it, New York Times is part of it. It's stuff I can tell you a lot about, because I know a lot about it now, because I've had to learn fast, baby, and I'm a slow learner, so it was pretty tricky. Let's have a look at George Lopez making a quick joke about the same subject. Then let's look at how MSNBC are, in a sense, continually framing the Madison Square Gardens event as a sort of hateful affair.
Donald Trump said he was going to build a wall, and George Lopez said, you better build it in one day, because if you leave that material out there overnight.
So there you go. And I suppose you could say that black people can use the N-word, gay people can use the Q-word, and maybe former drug addicts like me can make jokes about junkies or alcoholics or smackheads or skagheads or scumbags or whatever. Maybe that's true. But at a time where we are being divided more aggressively than ever, I think the unity that can come from comedy is vital. Let's not pretend that the ire generated post Tony Hinchcliffe's remarks isn't about political expediency and literal point scoring. It isn't about morality, because morality doesn't exist in politics. If it did, we wouldn't be exacerbating the war between Ukraine and Russia. We wouldn't be exacerbating and facilitating ongoing conflicts between Israel and Palestine and events in Gaza. We wouldn't be continually exacerbating the tensions between China and the United States of America. We would be looking to bring about diplomatic solutions urgently, even if that was costly to the interests of the military-industrial complex, or big pharma, or big food, or big agriculture, the sets of interests that ultimately control the political currents and political meteorology, which has to be continually masked from us, the electorate, we the people, because otherwise we simply wouldn't tolerate it. To further that point, here's MSNBC, is it specifically Micah, saying that the Trump rally was a festival of hatred or some such thing.
I think a lot of people are seeing that rally at Madison Square Garden, seeing all those people. Doesn't mean he's going to win the race, but my point is it's discouraging that so many people would gather and rally to hate speech, in America, that it's discouraging and it hurts that people who have family in Puerto Rico, who are Puerto Rican Americans, who are American citizens, are hearing hate like that. It's discouraging.
People are complicated. As a tactical error, you could perhaps say maybe it weren't wise to have a roast-pitched comedian at the MSG event. Maybe there should be more neutral celebrities that are so in a line with commerce and commodification that it doesn't really cause any disruption to see them. Celebrities like Beyonce or movie stars that we've just been used to seeing endorsing, now I would say globalist, corporatist candidates for years. To risk having someone like Tony Hinchcliffe at an event like that was extraordinary. I would say, as a stand-up comedian who has himself been subject to ire as a result of things I said once in my country, maybe about 5 or 6 scandals back, I got in trouble for making inappropriate jokes about sex on the radio. It caused madness in my country. It was when I was just starting to make movies in your country. And I realized then that people won't actually assess what you said, and they are not capable of assessing your intentions, so they will utilize what you said in order to pursue an agenda. Do you think that Mika doesn't have an agenda? Do you think that the legacy media don't have a preference when it comes to the outcome of this election? And do you think they are more aligned with your views, or do you imagine they might be in alignment with the intentions of globalist, corporatist interests who can never come out and directly tell you what they want, because otherwise you would become radicalized and revolutionary and you would refuse to cooperate? So even a small thing like jokes and humor and making inappropriate or off-color or a little bit edgy jokes about racial groups or sexual groups or anything, those are part of our communicative tools. That's how we establish trust. That's how we establish humanity. Whether you like Tony Hinchcliffe or whether you like Donald Trump, you have to at some point adhere to principles around free speech and free expression. That used to be the position of the left. Remember, Bobby Kennedy says, I didn't leave the Democrat Party left me. Remember, this is no longer the party of Martin Luther King. This is no longer the party that's about freedom and be who you are and express yourself, and art is important. This has become a censorial, controlling, centralized force that seeks to prohibit and inhibit you at the most basic level of your humanity in order that they can continue to profit and thrive in various ways.
It's discouraging, Joe, and I do want to show Michelle Obama and Kalamazoo, but I just think it's important to look at the situation, and it's not just, oh my gosh, about the race. It's, oh my gosh, how did we get here? How did we get here where a stadium of people come to hate? That's a different country, a different time.
You know how you get past that?
How do you get past that?
Work harder, vote.
Yes.
And
what there is now is a playbook. This is the playbook. We have to continue to say that Trump is like Hitler and the MAGA movement is like the Nazis. In order to do that, you have to ignore Donald Trump's history, both as a president and as a celebrity in the public eye. And you have to pretend that, you know, at least half of Americans are hateful. We're not just talking about MAGA hat wearers, although, hey, a hat is no big deal, is it really? Or face painters, or people that may have complex and wounded, injurious views when it comes to subjects like race and civil rights. We're talking about people in cheesecake factories in malls in Florida. We're talking about Christians on the Redneck Riviera. We're talking about old school Republicans. Morning Joe can't sit there and say, where did all of this hatred and tension come from? It came from you. I've experienced it. I've been on Morning Joe. I've seen and felt the contempt with which they approach people that they believe to be different. And if you're a person where there's not some protected characteristic, they will go full throttle with their insidiousness and hatred, not because they're dark, but because they are unconscious. Forgive them. They know not what they do. This is a time where we are required to awaken, where we have to refuse to believe their narrative. And most of all, we have to refuse to let go of our not even rights. Our basic nature is to be comedic, is to have fun, is to mess around, is to tease one another. And if people cross the line or make mistakes, then we have to have the ability to say, maybe they misjudged that man. And in the case of Tony Hinchcliffe, he was doing what comedians do, making jokes about subjects that he finds funny. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and the chat.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.